In an ominous sign of the turbulent times we're all living in, we're starting to see people go through some really extreme things. According to new research, millions of people in America are skipping meals every day because of the high cost of food. Even in the world's richest country, families are depriving themselves of their basic necessities due to the worst cost of living crisis in a generation. In some states, nearly 75% of U.S. households can't afford enough to eat. If you have been to a gas station, supermarket, or tried to pay your electricity bills at all in recent months, then you know the economy is a total and complete mess right now. We're seeing bills pile up higher and higher. Debt levels soar, rent and housing costs skyrocket, and every trip to the grocery store is making us more anxious than the one before. Meanwhile, wages are essentially flat. In fact, today's inflation means most workers actually took a pay cut. Conditions are getting exceedingly hard for our population. And to make things worse, a number of factors are now converging to create the biggest food crisis we've witnessed in our lifetime. In today's video, we've compiled the latest data that shows the reality many are facing, but the media seems to keep ignoring it. The pain caused by the highest living expenses we've seen since the 1970s is economically eviscerating millions of families in the U.S. and in the entire world. A new study conducted by the United Nations highlights that some things that are happening right now in developing nations are foreshadowing what's coming soon to America. The unplanned shift to green energy and the crisis in Ukraine have left many countries across the world with alarmingly low energy reserves. Fuel and fertilizer costs are so high that the entire global agricultural industry is sitting on very thin ice. Most farmers can't afford to plant crops. Those who can are seeing their crops getting destroyed by extreme weather events. At this point, food shortages are becoming far more extensive than anyone imagined. Unaffordable prices for gas, medicine, and housing are stoking social unrest and mass demonstrations all around the planet. Entire countries like Sri Lanka have gone bankrupt overnight. The new report released by the United Nations World Food Program uncovered that nearly 9 of 10 families in Sri Lanka are skipping meals to stretch out their food supply. The analysis underlined that what's going on in countries like Sri Lanka right now is a sneak peek at what life will be like in America when food shortages and food inflation really start to bite. Over the past couple of years, numerous U.S. farmers came forward to alert us about a perfect storm that was brewing in our food supply chain. In the past 24 months alone, U.S. farmers and ranches have been plagued by droughts, record heat waves, shortages, and soaring prices of diesel and fertilizer, a bird flu epidemic plus labor shortages, fires at processing plants, you name it. The explosive food prices we're seeing on our local supermarket shelves are reflecting the combination of squeezed food supplies and the biggest increase in the cost of living in 40 years. Grocery prices have spiked to record-breaking levels, and the rising costs aren't stopping. As we reported in previous videos, the nation's major food grocers are announcing price increases of 10 and up to 70% in a wide range of products starting this month, with grocery inflation hitting 12% in September, marking the highest spike over a 365-day period since 1974. A survey conducted by Dead Hammer revealed that we're not so distant from the reality that's dripping developing nations like Sri Lanka after all. The study found that nearly half of Americans, or 45%, are skipping meals as a result of inflated unaffordable prices. The main reason why approximately 122 million people in the nation are eating less is to cut back on food spending to be able to afford other essential expenses such as energy, rent, and gas. Researchers noted 1 in 10 Americans have turned to food banks in September, and 35% of people surveyed said they have fallen 3 or more months behind on at least one bill, including credit cards, rent, and mortgages, because their money is going to other things. Your rent is going up, groceries are going up, and gas is going up. The only thing that hasn't gone up is wages, said Jake Hill, Debt Hammer CEO. Stagnant wages are making it harder for people to make ends meet, with the survey also indicating that 43% of people are saying that their incomes are not keeping pace with inflation, and remember, inflation jumped over 8%. So even if you are lucky enough to get a raise, you're probably still making less money than you did a year ago. Because if your employer gave you a 3% raise, you actually took a 5% pay cut. In some states, the percentage of people eating less to be able to get buyers is eerily close to Sri Lanka's. For instance, a separate survey by Coupon Birds exposed that in West Virgin, more than 7 in 10 people, 75% of all West Virginians, are skipping meals because of the skyrocketing cost of food. In Ohio, 40% of adults have skipped meals. In Virginia, 2 million people have skipped meals. In New York, that number jumps to 7 million. In Kentucky, 53% of people have skipped meals in the past 30 days. The list goes on as food insecurity continues to spread across the country. If food prices continue to increase at this rate, which largely outpaces increases in wages, the inevitable consequence is an explosion in the number of people facing food insecurity. The last time we had such a big run-up in food insecurity rates was in the wake of the Great Recession. But even for those not at risk of hunger or starvation, the surges in food prices are jarring. Food matters a lot to our quality of life. Not being able to buy the foods that people are used to, that your children are asking for, that your family wants, that's a really hard thing. Any disruption of habit is very, very hard. Real-time data from the U.S. Census Survey suggests that food hardship has been steadily rising in families with children this year. In the richest country in the world, children in 274,000 American households have faced hunger. They've skipped meals or did not eat for entire days because their parents didn't have enough money to buy food. Food insecurity also plays a major role in a range of public health epidemics such as obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and tooth decay. Given that unhealthy processed foods with high levels of fat and sugar are often cheaper and more accessible than healthier options, inadequate nutrition can affect children's growth and physical development, as well as their ability to thrive, play, and learn. Students are also being impacted by the me-skimp strategy. 72% of U.S. college students say they feel stressed and anxious about the cost of living crisis, and to get by, 49% of means skipping meals. In a recent interview, 20-year-old Stacy says she's been skipping meals to make her supplies last longer. It's got to the point where I'm not even hungry anymore. My body is used to being deprived, but my mental health is falling apart. I'm so tired all the time, which is probably half from not eating and half from being stressed about money 24/7, she said. Every month, millions of Americans are forced to choose between paying for rent, healthcare, bills, childcare, and groceries because their wages are not enough to live by. 1 in 4 Americans relies on federal nutrition assistance such as food stamps and free school lunches, and about the same rate of elderly Americans are still experiencing higher levels of food insecurity than before the Great Recession. The escalation of food prices has been a crisis in the making since 1981, but we're finally starting to see the worst repercussions of it. Right now, many people are having to tap into their savings to be able to pay everyday expenses, and they're left with no financial cushion for unexpected emergencies, making them more vulnerable to falling into debt and becoming dependent on federal aid. Even the United Nations Secretary General is warning that this vulnerable state of many families in the U.S. and the world could lead to increased social instability as food costs continue to spiral. During an interview with CNBC, Queen Maxima of the Netherlands and the UN-Secretary General Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development said she's extremely worried about the impact of storing food and energy prices on families and our society. An increase of food prices of the magnitude that we are seeing of energy prices basically will mean that a lot of families are going to have from 3 or 2 meals a day to have 1 meal a day, and this in turn will actually probably be the source of even more social instability. So that worries me a lot. Because when you don't have fertilizers, you cannot increase your yield. Therefore, you are going to see less production. So we're going to have less food, which means that prices are probably going to go up even more. This is very worrying. The outlook for American crop production remains bleak, which means that the food you see in your grocery stores won't be so plentiful a few months from now. Prices are actually as low as they'll get for a while. From now on, supplies are expected to get even tighter. Food inflation is going to climb higher and higher. We must keep in mind that it takes time to grow food, and the current disruptions in food production are a recipe for disaster in the very near future. With farmers worldwide experiencing the same problem simultaneously, there is no way out. That's why we always advise our viewers to prepare now to survive tomorrow, as opposed to what the talking heads on the mainstream media say. Preparing for the worst doesn't mean you are paranoid. It means you are smart.